these lives much more so than all the rest of us.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, James. Thank you, Kevin. Well, as Senator Langford mentioned, this week marks a year since the Dobbs decision, but it's also been almost 50 years since the Roe issue and the Roe decision. And I think this is a good night that we stop and reflect on America's history. And it's a good moment for us to stop and remember why this issue is important and who we're fighting for. I think the who we're fighting for is easy. Obviously, we're fighting for those babies that were conceived yesterday, that were conceived 2 weeks ago, and for those future babies as well that are unborn as well. I think who we're fighting for is easy, but the why this issue is important, I think, is a bit more complicated. To some, this has been a legal battle, but to me, this has always been an issue of the heart. And at the center of the conflict, at the crux of the issue, the heart of the disagreement is, when does life begin? When does life begin? I think no one can stand up here and argue that the Constitution doesn't protect that life once life begins. Obviously, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a constitutional expert, I'm not an authority on previous legal precedent, but I have delivered a baby most every day of my life for some 30 years. And I think that gives me some insight on what life is and how do you define when life begins. I remember back in medical school asking myself that question. And I had some who would argue, well, when a baby takes its first breath, that's when life begins. But you know, actually, at the end of the first trimester, babies are gulping and taking their first breath. And others would say once a baby's born and it cries, that's when life begins. And I think there's some truth to that. I've seen miscarriages at 12 weeks, at 16 weeks, and 20 weeks, and every week of a pregnancy, I suppose. And every one of those babies, when it's born, is fighting for life. That it's trying to gasp for air, that it wants to be born and it wants to live. I think that certainly life is certainly beginning by that point in time. A lot of the world has said life begins at 15 weeks. At least that would be the low bar, that would be the minimal standard, and that makes sense that certainly life begins by 15 weeks. That's when a baby feels pain. That's when a baby responds to its brother or sister's voice in the room. When I use an ultrasound and I put it next to the baby typically responds in some way, shape, or form. And when that baby inside the womb hears its brother or sister or its mom's voice, often you can see the baby kicking and maybe its heart rate increasing. Some would argue that life begins at 12 weeks. For a long time, that's what we were being taught, that certainly begins by 12 weeks. After all, that's when we could hear it with a Doppler. But now we can hear a baby's heartbeat. We can see it on an ultrasound just 4 weeks after conception. So when does life begin? You want to know when I really began to understand and believe why life begins at conception was taking care of women with miscarriages. Again, 1 out of 4 women, 1 out of 3 women have a miscarriage. Very common. And every one of those women, whether it was a month after conception or 2 months after conception, grieved. They were grieving because they lost the life of that baby. Tell a woman who's had 3 miscarriages or 4 miscarriages and can't carry a pregnancy, tell her that life doesn't begin at conception. Talk to an infertile couple who spent years and a fortune trying to conceive. And when they finally do conceive, tell them that life doesn't begin at conception. So I believe in the miracle of life. I believe that life begins at conception. And that's why we're here today, to honor this Dobbs decision. It's our responsibility to be a voice for the voiceless, to honor the sanctity of life, and fight to protect the lives of the millions of unborn babies. Thank you.